All right, so in this video, I'm going to work on getting some basic interactivity built into my sketch where I've already done the work of setting up my two graphics layers, one with each version of my self-portrait. My goal here is to get the eyeballs of each of my versions of myself to follow the touch point on the screen. So my plan is to use the map function to remap the position of the touch point on the screen to the position of the pupil and the iris. So I'm jumping back here to Illustrator to make some masking shapes, which are essentially unfilled ellipses that will go around the eyeball on each of my characters. And this is sort of a little bit of a workaround to some of the limitations in P5 where there's not a built-in function for something like a clipping mask that you would use in Illustrator to accomplish the same thing. But luckily, it's pretty straightforward. And you can see here, I'm just labeling this in green to make it clear what I'm doing, which is just drawing a very heavily stroked transparent ellipse around the circumference of the eyeball. And that way, I can layer it over top of the pupil and the iris on each eye, and that will give me the illusion of the eyeball moving around as though it's a three-dimensional object when I get that interaction set up. So now that I've got those shapes positioned in my composition, I'm just going to jump into my code, find where they go in my layering order, and just code them in. And as you can see here, I'm just working back and forth between Illustrator and my code. Again, this is my preferred way of working. You could obviously do this from Photoshop. You could do this from pencil and paper. You could do this completely in the code. Really not one correct strategy towards accomplishing what we're doing here. And the way that I've set my code up, you can see I can really easily swap back and forth between the two compositions. For now, I'm just doing that by commenting out one line or the other at the bottom of my draw loop. But later, when we get to more advanced interactivity, I'll want to be fading transparency or opacity between the two images. Now at this point, I'm getting ready to put in that map function to basically tie the interaction of touching somewhere on the screen with moving the pupil and the iris shape. So just kind of testing this out here. In a second, you'll see I was actually controlling the wrong shape. So I don't want the whites of the eyes to move. I want the colored iris and the pupil to move in conjunction with where the mouse is on screen. And when we get this onto a mobile device, that point will correspond to the touch point rather than the mouse. So just doing a little bit of guessing and testing here. I love the googly eyes. They make me laugh every time. But adjusting the range of the map function for the horizontal motion of the mouse, replacing the static horizontal position coordinate of the ellipses that are making up the iris and the pupil. Now, at the same time, I'm also thinking ahead to how this is going to adapt to a mobile device touchscreen and sort of wondering whether or not that mouse X system variable that I'm using to control the map function is going to translate. And turns out it does, but you know, it's important to be thinking ahead of how is this going to end up in its sort of finished state, and will the variables in the interaction that you're using for the screen version correspond to the mobile version. So you can see here, I'm doing a similar thing for the skeleton version. I have just inserted some new ellipses with red eyes, but same sort of map following function for the horizontal and vertical location, tying it to the touch point on the screen. So that's looking pretty good. We are ready to move on to some more advanced interaction coding.